If you like human design, you'll love the Sphinx code. So of course I'm like, ooh, Sphinx code, what's that?
Am I just talking out of the side of my neck, or does that statement speak to you in the least?
I'll be honest, it was not the thing that pulled me there. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do the psychedelics.
My very favorite part of everything that you said is that you play a crazy nurse on a soap opera. I love it.
I loved how you pulled that back around. I was like, you got all that from that? That's pretty good.
Tell us a little bit about the ayahuasca experience. Paint a picture for us and walk us through it.
At the end of the day, the plant medicine was just...
I just have to stop the conversation and say, I want to do it right now. Go on though, please.
I think the panic was, I got to get out, and I can't.
We're going to talk about all of that in just a moment. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about psychedelics and plant medicine, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a very special guest and an all-around vibrant and fun person, I just have to say, Sonia Satra. Sonia, welcome to the show, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Scott. I am so excited to be here today. I love this whole concept that you're doing here on Webdelics. It's awesome. So, me, who am I in a nutshell, right? Well, I guess we often start with what we do. So, I'm a coach and an NLP practitioner. I also have something called Modicize, which is an integration of coaching and exercise. I just published a book, so I'm now officially an author too. And in my other life, still sometimes life, I am an actress. I'm best known for Lucy Cooper Spalding on Guiding Light and Psycho Nurse Barbara on One Life to Live. I always add, it's not typecast, really. And then finally, because it's also a big part of my life, I'm a mom to two. I have a daughter and a son. And yeah, that's, I guess, me.
That is also fascinating. I love the diversity of what you do. But before we go any further, just in case anyone doesn't know what it is, can you explain NLP?
Neuro-linguistic programming. So it's a form of coaching. For some reason, people sometimes give it a bad rap, I think because it has been used like hypnosis on stage to do, but it's such a powerful coaching program, which really ties in the whole nervous system and the mind and the body. And I use a lot of the exercise from it. It taps into your senses, your vision, your auditory, your all aspects really of your sensory system. And I use a lot of it because I've found it to be incredibly powerful and effective. So
thank you so much. Very interesting. And I have no doubt in one way or another that will come up again as we have this conversation today. But I have to say, my very favorite part of everything that you said is that you play a crazy nurse on a soap opera. I love it. I want you to be on every show that I ever host for the rest of my life, just for that. But that being said, leaving aside my personal preferences for wacko psycho nurses on soap operas, and I really do have such a preference.
Should we ask you about that?
Right. Is there some trauma?
Do we need to be worried about it?
Well, I can assure you I'll never actually be that psycho nurse. At least we can say that much. But I will also say one of the other things that was interesting about that intro was the way you described yourself holistically. And that leads into the subtext of the topic of the day, which is activating the force. San Pedro, finding your inner masculine and taking action in your life. Now, what does that have to do with you talking about your kids and your job and exercise and fitness and all of that sort of stuff? Well, I'm just going to explain it. At the end of the day, many people believe that whether we identify as male, female, or something else, nonetheless, we all have energy of other quote unquote genders within us. And so when we had our pre-show discussion, and we came upon this as an interesting topic for you to focus on, and for us to build an entire discussion around, I couldn't help but be struck by the fact that that theme, as you just did in your self-description, integrates the holistic nature of who and what we are. Am I just talking out of the side of my neck, or does that statement speak to you in the least?
No, I loved how you pulled that back around. I was like, you got all that from that. That's pretty good.
You're like, I wasn't saying any of that.
Yeah, no, I think it is very true. I think it is important to look holistically. I think that's a lot of what I believe in, and a lot of what um, as we follow the force, what it taught me, in terms of, obviously, a female, and I identify as a female, and I have a fair amount of feminine qualities, but this one definitely activated more of the masculine side, and I thought that was really powerful and very, very helpful to see things through that lens and have that perspective.
So I just got to keep it real. Ask this up front before we get into the details of your story. What if I'm listening to or watching this and feeling uncomfortable about exploring a medicine that I believe, after hearing this title, might make me behave or become something like a gender that I'm not? What if that freaks me out? What would you say to such a person?
So I don't know that's a written rule. I don't know. San Pedro typically is known as the masculine side. We did ayahuasca first, which is more of the feminine. But I wouldn't say that everybody in my group necessarily had the masculine kind of experience that I did. So I would say don't go into it with the preconceived notion that that's going to happen. But if that's freaking you out, I would say, how cool of an opportunity to embrace that side of you. Because as you mentioned, Scott, like we do have all of it. But we're male, female, and one is more predominant, but they're all helpful. They're all really important in terms of creating success and in creating harmony and happiness, really, in our life. And so, uh, I wouldn't be so worried. It's not like you're going to go out and do something crazy
Mm.
that's, the opposite of who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's more of opening up another avenue, another piece of you, another part of you that you can tap into when you really need it.
You talked about we and they when you discussed your experience with San Pedro. And I believe so far in this series, San Pedro has only come up once before in a discussion I had with a guest by the name of Stephen Kuhn, who also referenced it as enabling him to tap into his inner masculine after,
Hmm.
like you just mentioned, having done ayahuasca. And so perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about the context in which you had your San Pedro experience and what led you to it. I have to know.
So this is where you might need to cut me off because I could go on forever. Uh, but so it all began during COVID, like many things
Yeah.
all began, right? And I was on the rabbit hole, on the internet rabbit hole, and I, at the time, was looking at something very benign. I was looking up human design. It's a self-assessment, and I wanted to just learn something about it, specifically a question that I had. And I happened to have landed on a page by somebody who said, if you like human design, you'll love the Sphinx Code. So, of course, I'm like, ooh, Sphinx Code, what's
I'm
that?
excited just hearing about it. I can see her right now with the hat and everything.
I know. So I'm like, okay, Sphinx Code. And that led me to a shaman's page who created the Sphinx Code. Incidentally, I did end up doing my Sphinx Code. And there's two things that were important about that. One, I ended up learning the Sphinx Code. I'm one of, I think, like 26 wisdom keepers
Oh.
that can do Sphinx Code readings. And it's incredibly powerful. Oh my gosh. It's like tells you so much about yourself from all your wounds, your masculine wounds, your feminine wounds, how that shows up in your work, in your relationships, what your inner essence is, your ego, your evolved ego, including your purpose.
Wow,
So it
I just have to stop the conversation and say I want to do it right now. Go on, go on though, please.
it's really, really, really cool. And funny, one of it uses it uses tarot. It's not a tarot reading, but it uses the archetypes that are in the major arcana of tarot in different places, and it has different meanings depending upon where it is, and it doesn't change. It's your soul's blueprint. But I had two force cards. So I think force was actually an important thing for me to kind of activate. One, it was in my feminine wound, and second, it was in my highest career. So it's an important placement for me. So uh moving on, Sphinx Code did that, and another thing he did was wisdom quests. And I was like, wisdom quest. So this one was a 10-day. You would do some learning, then you would do a 5-day nature solo. So we would go out and camp by ourselves in the middle of Spain. Actually, it was right on the border of Spain and France, and no food, just water. So for 5 days, yes.
Whoa.
And that was the part that got me. I was like, could I really do that?
Yeah. I hope you ate a lot before you went.
I did. um, but and then we came down from the mountain and all kind of came back together again. And that's when we did ayahuasca that evening. And we were allowed to have a little bit of food. And then we did ayahuasca. And then the next day we did the San Pedro ceremony. And then we wrapped it up. Somewhere in there, we also did the sweat lodge. So it was a really incredible, powerful experience. And yeah, so I was like, I have to do this. And then I was terrified to do it, but I was like, I have to do
Uh,
it.
I can imagine. Well, did you know that psychedelics and plant medicine would be part of the quest before you went on it?
I knew it. I knew it would be. I knew it was the last 2 days. And I'll be honest, it was not the thing that pulled me there. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do the psychedelics. There were a couple of people who that was the primary reason they were on that.
Mm,
The other was what they had to. For me, I think it was more of like, could I actually do the 5 day by
mm.
myself, no food? That felt like the test and what that experience would reveal. But at the end of the day, the plant medicine was just so mind um blowing in a great way. It was really it just was so much greater than I ever anticipated. That was more of a I have to do this because it's part of
Oh,
it.
interesting.
And at the end it was the one that I think created the greatest transformation. Obviously the whole thing was big, but that was really huge. And I was supposed to go 1 year, and some stuff happened and I didn't end up going. So I ended up going the next year, and I ended up going with my daughter too. So it ended up being a bit of a that added an additional fear factor of, oh my gosh, I have my 17-year-old or 18-year-old daughter with me now, and I'm responsible for her in the woods by herself and whatever the heck happens on this plant medicine. But uh, it's been life changing for her as well. So it was a great thing.
We're going to talk about all of that in just a moment, but perhaps you can tell us whether you had any resistance to going into the psychedelic component of this when you first heard about it. Was it something where you were like, okay, I'm going to do this? Or were you like, okay, why not? Or some other reaction?
Uh, so I think that was a little bit of all.
Mm-hmm.
I had a ton of resistance to the entire trip. I
Mm,
was terrified. Um, and I also, because there was the added component of my daughter, and God forbid something happened,
yeah,
I'd never be able to forgive myself.
yeah.
And I had no idea what I was going into. I really had no idea. And I wanted to do it. I was in touch with the shaman. I was speaking to other people who had done it. My husband was speaking to other people who had done it because he needed to know.
Yeah.
And, but to give you an idea of how much resistance, I was supposed to get on a plane on Tuesday, and Sunday I was like looking into flights and still debating whether I was going to do it.
Wow.
And so I finally bought it Sunday night, and Tuesday we left and we got there, and we were going to be picked up the following day. And even that day, we were supposed to meet a few people, and we were like, where are they? How come they're not here? Is this real? We had all these backup
Oh,
numbers. We had
yeah.
backup to backup numbers. Um, yeah, so there was a lot of just fear about the whole experience. But once we got there, it was amazing. I mean, the shaman was so great. His wife was unbelievable and very calming and very sort of matter of fact, and talked us through her whole experience on the plant medicine. We could ask any and every question known to man on it, and that was really helpful. And then it was really stages, because first it was the sweat lodge, and then it was the 5 days nature solo. So I didn't have time to worry about the plant medicine because I had too many things first.
Like starvation.
Exactly. It was like, oh my God, what happens if I'm like dead in the woods? Doesn't matter about the plant
Right.
medicine. So, um, and then when we got back, yeah, then I think we were waiting down to be picked up from the mountain because we all kind of converged in one place. We were happy to sort of reunite, realize everybody was okay. And then it started to turn again, like, oh gosh, we're going to do it. And two of the other guys in sort of my cohort had done it before. And so I kept asking them more questions, or even repeating questions I had already heard answers to. But yeah, I was constantly looking for reassurance up until then. They did the whole setup outside by a fire. We put on for the ayahuasca was first. We had white. We were in sleeping bags, and at that point, there was sort of this place within me that was like, all right, I'm come this far. I'm not going to walk away now. This is part of the journey, and whatever comes will come. So, right before, there was a bit of a sort of release of, here I am. Whatever happens, happens.
Interesting. I'm going to ask the next question, knowing that I might not ask it in the most sensitive way possible. So if it comes off offensively or abrasively or anything like that, understand that my heart's in the right place. And you can correct me. I'm cool with
Got my jukes up.
it.
Okay.
Thank you. And that, by the way, goes to anyone who's listening or watching. As I have talked about my own experience with psychedelics through my journey on the Webdelics podcast, as well as discuss the various experiences that guests have had with people in my social network or people who are fans of the show who I might talk to. One thing that has come up a few times is, well, I would never do that as a woman all alone. And
Mm-hmm.
some folks have expressed real concern that if they were to go to a strange country or even a location with a male shaman, or even with a male and female shaman, but the male being the dominant presence in the room, that they would feel at risk and extremely unsafe. Did you ever have any concerns like that? And if so, do you have any advice for women who might be feeling that?
So I think that is a very legitimate concern. And yes, I had very, very, very much had that concern, as did my husband, especially sending two of us
Mm,
there. He was not that into this idea.
interesting.
um, but I did as much research as you possibly could. Um, I I I had spoken to some people, including other women who had done it with him. I had actually just come through the Sphinx Code training with a gentleman, and that was a long time. It sort of spanned over 3 months, so I got a better chance of getting to know the shaman. So I felt like, all right, well, there's a little bit of a relationship here. It felt better. My gut said it felt okay. And I spoke to the other gentleman who I'd done the training with, and he felt like his experience and all the people he knew who had known the shaman. So I definitely did some back check on him. Not that that is like 1,000% guarantee, right? You never really know until you
Yeah.
get there. But and yeah, I did special coaching sessions on it. I did
Mm,
like lots of stuff to really tune into because I was really nervous and I couldn't identify as the nerves him or is my the nerves the experience
hmm
because it's hard to say in those situations. But um I I think at the end of the day, it does matter being, I was so grateful, like so grateful that I was with somebody who I trusted. And
hmm
in the experience, I thought that even
hmm
I had the cognizance to think like, wow, I'm really happy that I feel a trust here.
hmm
Um, and so I guess I would say, in a perfect world, do as much research, go through somebody that you know is reputable, preferably, and I got this advice a lot, was go through somebody who's had the experience with that person already. So you
hmm
are getting some like firsthand,
hmm
not just secondhand knowledge of who it is. Uh, I mean, it's better and I was happy to have a group because there were a couple other females in there and that made me feel better.
hmm
And there were some other males. Yeah, I was happy to know that the guy that I got through the training with, not that I really knew him that well. He was from Greece, but he was a family guy, and I felt a connection and a trust with him. So when he said he was going, I felt like, okay, well, there's somebody else I know who's a male who I kind of feel a certain connection to. So I felt like there were a number of things set up to to sort of put me in the best possible situation. But I would say the number one, do your research and preferably get firsthand testimonials and go with that person.
Real.
And if somebody's interested in going with the shaman that I went with, I would very, very much recommend him firsthand because I had a very positive experience. And I think he and his wife are just insanely knowledgeable about plant medicine. They really, really know their stuff and they stay
Mm,
kind of in their lane because there were a number of other plant medicines that were being discussed, specifically some that, he would refer to as more the black magic plant medicine. And he's like, I don't go there. But if you want to do that, I know somebody who I trust who does. So he also was very conscious and cognizant of what he knew incredibly well, and it was a lot, but it wasn't everything. And I had a lot of respect for that too.
yeah, you know, you kind of have to. That builds someone's credibility if they're saying, this is what I'm the expert in, and I'm going to be candid. I don't know a lot about this other thing, and I'm not going to put you at risk by experimenting on your brain. That is kind of awesome, I
Exactly.
have to admit. Now, talk to us a little bit then. Once you had that comfort and you and your daughter were there, tell us a little bit about the ayahuasca experience. Paint a picture for us and walk us through it.
So the ayahuasca was the first. This was the evening that we had all just come back from the 5 days out and about. We had had a little bit of food, so we're feeling okay. Although um, it was going to be done at night. We had sort of arrived, been picked up around noon, and we were going to do this at 10 o'clock at night. So there was still a pretty big span of time. And they set us up outside. They had a beautiful, I don't know, backyard sounds too small. It was a huge piece of land.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's right in the, like, right on the border of France and Spain. It was a very, very beautiful nature area, which also actually, I thought this, sorry, I'm backtracking just for a second, but I did a session with somebody who I've also done some work with, who's very intuitive and just a really great guide. And one of the things that he keyed in on is, do you feel a connection not only to the shaman, do you feel a connection to the medicine, and do you feel a connection to the land?
Mm,
And I thought that was so powerful because I realized I had never thought of that question, but I was like, actually, I do have a connection to this land. I don't know why. I have no like real reason, but there's something about that land that feels safe it feels nurturing. It felt like a place that was positive to go. And that was one of the things that actually probably made the final decision for me to go. But anyway, I regress.
Don't. I think that was an incredible digression because I will say I hadn't really thought about this before, but my own psilocybin experience, one of the things that the guide I had asked me to do was we went to a space that was sort of like the bottom of a
Mm-hmm.
valley where there was like a almost like a peace sign made out of rocks,
Ooh.
and it was an offering space for the Native American spirits
Oh,
there. Now,
give me chills.
I have been a mythological, yeah, obsessive ever since I was a little boy, and he knew that going into the conversation. He said, "Oh, usually I don't have first timers do an offering to the gods here, but you're so steeped in mythology, they actually may hear it from you." And going through that ritual, which was something I never imagined in my life I would do, I did feel that connection. And I realized also that as long as I've lived here in New York City, I've learned nothing about the land or the people
Mm.
who inhabited this land before this city was built. And that's a huge knowledge gap and an area of lack of connection with this one glorious place that I consider my home,
Mm.
that I need to find and that I'm working to find. And I suspect a lot of people may feel that way after they hear what you just said. Do I have a connection with the land that I walk on every day? Do I know about its history? And thinking about then that as something to consider when you're going on this journey, it's a big deal. And again, something no one so far has addressed. Thank you very much. I turn the story back over to you.
Yeah, I thought I actually, well, I'm so glad glad that we did go there because I had
Yeah.
been turned on to somebody in Peru. And it was funny, there was this like block, and when the land question came up, I realized that was a big, I don't know, it could have been the person, but it also there was just something about imagining being in that like territory that really felt like I was drawn to it. So yes, consider that also. Um,
Thank you.
Speaking of land, we were on it. We had just spent 5 days in it. And then we were all guided to, they set up blankets, on the land. They set up a fire, and we all sort of put our sleeping bags in a bit of a circle around. The shaman was at the top. His wife, who also participated with us both as a guide and was also partially in it, and she did some musical instruments that were just incredible. And she has an amazing voice too. The whole thing was just spectacular. Um, so she was there, and ayahuasca, known for being a little sick, even though they had so assured us that ayahuasca respects that you did the hard work of not eating for 5 days. So it
Mm.
usually doesn't, it's the consequences or the sort of the effects of it aren't as dramatic. Not so sure that actually held true. But they had bowls, and they had, the land, and it was like, if you, whatever you got to do, just do it.
I just think you're wonderful, Sonia. Thank you.
Oh gosh. Going back to Sphinx code, I thought this was so interesting too. And I know this without knowing your Sphinx code, it's hard to say, but there's a tower card again, if you know tarot arcanas, major arcanas, tower is one of them. And every but tower is supposed to be specific to ayahuasca. So if you have a tower card, ayahuasca is particularly great and opening for you. Not that it's not for everybody, but it's specifically, it's
Mm.
like their medicine. And the three people in the group who had tower cards in their Sphinx code did not get sick. Everybody else did. And I thought that was
Wow.
just a little ironic. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah, that'll shut you up for a minute.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then what happened?
Yeah, so anyway, so we start, and my daughter was first, and she had a tower card, and I think he had been really priming and prepping her for this ceremony. He was like, this is going to really just transform you. But she was terrified, absolutely positively terrified. And we were supposed to go in order, and she was starting with the drinking it, and She just could not. She like took a sip and that was about all she could do. So he
Mm-hmm.
was extremely patient, really tried to give the space, and then eventually decided, like, okay, we'll let you sit with that for a little bit. We'll come back. And then we went down the sort of row, and I was somewhere towards the end. And I'm lying down. I go and I tuck myself into my little sleeping bag. And at first, I'm like, okay, that's not so bad. And you lose, as you probably know, all track of time. Time is irrelevant. I have no idea what time. Like, could have been 5 minutes. It could have been an hour. Probably was closer to 45 minutes. He went
Mm-hmm.
around and asked if we wanted a second. And at that point, my stomach was kind of churning just a little. And I was like, no, I think I'm good. And everybody else sort of did a second. And then people started getting sick or started to express themselves in various ways. And then she came up to me and she's like, he would like you to do another half a cup. It's like, really?
I don't
I
want
was, I know, I was
to.
like, okay, if he really thinks it's the right thing, I'm going to trust because in this moment, everything had really just been so I don't know, perfect. It had all worked out so well that I did have a great trust. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to trust this process too. So I did the other half cup, sat down. Oh boy. And that's when it hit me. And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm really not. Just sharing my experience. But
Hey, we're here to keep it real,
yeah,
though. Mm-hmm.
holy crap. That was when all of a sudden I just started spinning and it was like the kaleidoscope pixelations. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
seeing all these different colors and all these pixels and I'm spinning and I freaked. I had a moment of freaking out where I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, this must be what people talk about when they go on a bad trip. I had never done drugs, anything really. That was not
Mm-hmm.
part of my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, okay, you're supposed to relax. I can't relax because I'm spinning. Oh my God, relax, breathe, don't breathe. I can't breathe. La, la, and I was,
Yeah.
and you'd open your eyes and it would slow it a little bit, but everything was kind of fuzzy. You knew you were there. You were present enough. I knew I was lying there. I could hear people around me. I could see the sky and the stars. So it wasn't like I was in such an altered reality when my eyes were open, um, that I didn't have cognition of what was going on. But I also, when my eyes were closed, everything was just spinning, and eventually that led me to get sick. Ugh. And then I laid back down. And a little bit longer after, I started to get sick again. And then he came over and she came over. And he was just like, you just have to let it release it, just let it go. And then all of a sudden, I was really sick, really, really sick. And then I just kind
Wow.
of fell into his arms a little bit at that moment. And he just sat there and I just sort of like, he held me and he's just like, that's all of the tension, all of the nervousness getting here, all of that stuff, letting it go, releasing everything else that's here, just let it go, and she was singing and she was doing these bells and it was just this kind of, I can't say that felt great, but it was sort of a magical moment. And then after, again, don't know how much time, probably 10 minutes ish, he was just like, why don't you just go lay back down again? And then at that point I was totally in the zone, and then it started to feel like a little happier. I was just sort of drifting, saw different images. And she had mentioned something. She's just like, yeah, you kind of can't believe what people say when they're on ayahuasca because sometimes they'll just say things that are really crazy. Like they'll have illusions of grandeur, like I'm God and I'm going to save the world, or I'm going to marry you, or I'm going to, and in that moment, or I'm a shaman and I'm going to save the world. And somehow that just, I started thinking that and realizing how ridiculous that was. Like, I totally am not God in this moment, but I could see how somebody might think they were. And I just thought that was the funniest thing ever. So I laughed for probably a half hour straight.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound that bad because I was going to ask you earlier, if I may, when you were going through the fear period, were you afraid that you'd never come out?
I was afraid. Yes. My biggest fear was how am I going to make it? Because in my head, I was like, all right, this is going to last 6 to 8 hours. So I had the time period.
Mm.
Again, not like I could keep track of it, but I had some, relationship to time of 6 to 8 hours. And so I was like, I don't know how I can't handle this for 6 to 8 hours. I'm never going to handle it. And I think the panic was, I got to get out and I can't. I'm in it. Like,
Yeah.
how do I deal with this? What am I going to do? And that was that panic intermittent with, okay, breathe. You know, the panicking is going to make it worse. Just breathe. Take a second, open your eyes, then, okay, go back there, breathe. And then I would panic. And that kind of cycled for a little bit until I got sick again. And then that was when he came over and just kind of like was with me. And he was with everybody. He did that to everybody had their moment. Um,
Mm.
yeah, everybody had their moments. My daughter ended up having a little bit more, and then mostly just crying. She's like, that sucked. I just cried the whole time. But
Mhm.
but she also felt like, oh, maybe I didn't go there enough. But I think it was exactly what she
Mhm.
was supposed to have in that moment. And that is
Mhm.
one of the things I believe. I think people got profound messages, had profound experiences. I I had a little thing with my foot was hurting, and so at a certain point I was like, "Hey, if you want to fix my foot, feel free." That was after my laughter, and all of a sudden my foot just started spinning. It was like meow, and then it went the other
Wow.
way, and then it went this way, and then it went that way.
Like kind of like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, but your foot?
Yes.
Wow. I love, by the way, how we keep coming back to horror stuff.
I
But
know.
maybe that's just
We
me.
started with
Anyway.
Psycho Nurse Barbara. I guess it's all fitting. Oh, the other thing that I didn't know was going to happen, but is actually I kind of wish I had known. When I at first in that panic mode, um, and even after that, my legs were popping like jumping beans. They were like they were just like popping. I mean, that's the best thing I could say. They were like popping off. They were just like impulses, and they would like pop up off the ground, my whole leg, and sometimes my arm too, but it was mostly my legs. And at one point, it was ridiculous. It was like pop, 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 pop. And after I got sick for the second time and he came over, he's like, that pop, your legs, that's just chi energy releasing. He's like, it's perfectly normal. It's okay.
Interesting.
And that was very comforting because I was like, what the heck? I'm seeing things. My limbs are out of control. It was just weird. It was a very unsettling in that moment of panic. And I knew not to panic. So I was back and forth, like I did not achieve nirvana in that moment, but I got myself back to a place where I could
Yeah.
survive. But I would say if you're ever doing it, that is 1,000% the key. Like, don't forget that part. Like, you just have to breathe and go through it and just sort of like allow whatever, okay, here it is, and opening your eyes does help a little bit.
Wow. So you had this experience. Talk us through the rest of it, but then how did that lead into San Pedro coming into your life?
Yes. So the only other thing that I got that I felt, they say often with ayahuasca, you'll get messages around food. I've been a vegetarian, kind of wannabe, or pescatarian, wannabe vegan for many,
Mm-hmm.
many years, never having fully succeeded at that. And interestingly, I got sort of the message of you can eat a little meat. You should probably eat a little,
Mm.
not a lot, but a little. And so I was like, okay,
Okay, the plants were speaking in a way that plants often
do.
don't.
Right,
Yeah,
or
wow.
don't, or you don't
Or maybe
hear,
they
but
do.
they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, maybe they got tired of you eating them.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I don't know. So I kind of have actually. I loosened up just a little bit. Not that that was
Interesting.
a big. It was never some big. I just gave it up to see how I would feel, and then I never wanted to go back. But
Yeah.
I've had a little bit since then, and seems fine. So that was kind of that. And at a certain point, they had said that they would bring out a little food at the end of it if people wanted it. If they wanted to stay and sleep outside, they could. If they wanted to go sleep in the house, they could. Some of us were in tents or yurts on their property. Um, I wasn't going anywhere. He came over at one point. He's like, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, everything's great." He's like, "Do you want to go inside?" No, I'm good. I woke up. There was one other gentleman who also slept out there. So when that 6 a.m. sun came beaming down, we woke up to that.
Wow.
But I did remember at some point, probably like 6 hours after this whole thing went on, I remember hearing like glasses and, food and people talking about eating something. Um, but I had no desire at that point, other than to me, it was like, oh, I guess it's over. And so it's interesting, right? You lose all track of time, and yet we as a Western society are so programmed to time.
Mm.
And time, I don't think I even realized that till the second, how it was like, okay, it's 6 to 8 hours. I just got to make it through 6 to 8 hours. And then like the clanging of this is time. And then it was time to get up. There was still some element of time that gave me maybe structure or comfort.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
San Pedro then was next.
Oh
How were
gosh.
you prepped? What happened?
Da-dun.
I love drum rolls. Thank you
I
for
know.
that.
Wake up 6 a.m. Didn't really sleep a whole heck of a lot, but didn't seem to really matter. We had breakfast. I was hungry for breakfast because the little bit I ate after the 5 days of not eating had come up. And so I was pretty
Mm,
hungry at this point, and they cooked a real breakfast, so I had it. Um, and I didn't, San Pedro wasn't really known to make you sick, or at least I hadn't heard anything. Ayahuasca, a lot of people know that's something that can
hmm
happen. It's part of the process, I think. But um, so I was like, great, I can eat. So I ate, and I don't know. I think we were going to go back up to the mountain that we had been in. Um, Actually, my side of the mountain, because there was the French side and the Spanish side. I had been on the Spanish side, so we were going up on the Spanish side, and we were going to spend the day having taken San Pedro and walk down the mountain. And so it's definitely something where you can walk, like it's not a problem. It's not like ayahuasca where it's kind of more pleasant to be laying down. Um, but anyway, so it's around lunchtime and they start prepping it. So they set up the table outside and there's like a jar of pills. Oh God. And they're all filled with the San Pedro. I think I had like, I don't know, 24 of them in my glass, and I had the least of
mm,
everybody. Even my daughter,
wow.
they were like, they were going to press you a little bit more. And everybody else had like massive amounts. And they said you could take the pills, again, in respect to the plants. They say the plants, like, I don't know what you want to use the right honor, or like prefer that you at least taste the plant for part of it. So they recommended that some of the pills you kind of open up, they were capsules, you open up and you have that and you drink that so that
Mm,
you have some, you're not just swallowing a pill.
hmm
And so I did. I couldn't, it was really six and one half dozen of the other, of which was better or worse.
hmm
None of the stuff tastes great. But I did it. They gave you a little lemon sort of after, so that sort of took away some of the taste. And I felt fine, We also picked a card at that time from a deck, and I got, what did I get? Oh gosh, I got wow. I know what it meant, but I'm forgetting what the actual card was. Anyway, the meaning of it was graduation. He's like, "Oh, it's kind of like graduation." And I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" He's just like, "Well, graduation. There's like happiness, you feel proud, you feel some good, maybe there's a little sadness, a little letting go. You'll probably have a range of stuff." So everybody's card was in some way a message of the potential of what they might experience. So mine was graduation. So I knew this going in. Then we loaded up into two cars and we started driving. We're driving along the highway very fast. was like, forget, ayahuasca killing me. This might be. And I'm like chatty Cathy, talking, asking really lots of personal questions to the guy next to me, but he was really gracious and just sort of happy to answer my questions. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to be sick. And so they stopped the car on the side of the highway and I got out and I like, and I got really sick.
Wow.
But the guy was like, we can't be stopped on the highway with you, Charlie. We need to get you back in. So after
Wow.
that, I got back in. We got to the top of the mountain and I got out at the top and I was sick again. I was the only person who got sick. Nobody else got sick. But I definitely seemed to be having a lot of release of stuff. So then I know at that point, my daughter's just like, you know what? I think it would be good if we were separated here. So maybe you could stay at the back. I'm going to the front. It's like,
What, the
fine.
embarrassment syndrome coming in?
I don't know. Actually, it's very interesting in our Sphinx codes and our like connection. There was so much that was revealed. And in
Mm,
some ways, we can both, I guess maybe like a very any typical mother-daughter, not in a terrible way, but we can um, trigger each other in different ways. And she sort of intuitively knew that she was triggering me and that that might be contributing to what was
mm,
going on, which was interesting. I didn't know that till after because I was doing my own thing. But anyway, she went ahead. I kind of like went in the back for a little bit. I felt like as I was following everybody after getting sick so much, it kind of felt a little like I had had a couple drinks. You know, I was perfectly fine. I could walk, but it was like, I just felt a little out there. And we're walking down, we're going, and I'm not like in a great mood at this moment. I'm just like, whatever, I got to get down this mountain. And there was a whole episode with somebody with the mountain. I won't even go into that. But anyway, they were going to go try to find some of his stuff that he had lost. So we stopped at that place where they were going to go on this little scavenger hunt. And I ended up stopping a little further back and I just like cried. I just like sat on the
mm,
rock and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I can't even tell you what I was sobbing about. All I knew I was so sad. And the shaman came up to me and he's just like, you're gonna be okay. This is gonna pass too,
mm,
And then she came up to me and she's just like, "How you doing?" I was like, "That's great." And she's like, "Yeah, I know this part's not so fun, but it's gonna get better. Don't worry." I was
mm,
like, "All right." And so I just sobbed and
mm,
sobbed and sobbed, and eventually she came up to me and she's like, "You know what? We're gonna go a little further just so we can get off this mountain today," because I was basically holding up the group at that point. So I was like, fine, we'll go. So I walked a little further and we get to another set of rocks. Mind you, other people are having very different experiences. There's a couple that are climbing trees. They're like, fine. There's another guy who's taking pictures of every little iota detail of nature and being like, oh my God, look at this bug. It's amazing. My daughter and this other gentleman, my Sphinx Code guide trainer guy that I worked with, they were kind of off in a corner, kind of looking at all of us like, what are they doing? They were having their own experience. So everybody's experience was pretty different at this point. Um, there was the qigong teacher that was involved. She didn't do the 5 day nature solo this time, but she was kind of part of our group at the same time she was teaching us qigong. She was having a bit of an experience and she moved ahead. Interestingly, her inner essence is force, and so she moved ahead. And I decided, all right, I'll lie down on the rocks. It was really sunny, and I'm lying on the rocks. And I knew in this region, the only animal that was a problem or was poisonous, like there were no bears, no mountain lions, no nothing that was going to hurt you, which was very comforting in that 5 day nature
yeah.
zone. But there was a viper. That's a poisonous snake. That's the only thing of any remote danger in this area. And they rarely come out. Snakes rarely do, but I knew that it was there. So I'm lying on the rocks, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna get bitten by this viper. A viper is gonna come out and it's gonna bite me, and that's what I'm gonna have to deal with. And I was just like, that really sucks. Like, I wonder how they're gonna get me down. And I started to contemplate the whole journey of what was gonna happen after I got bitten by this viper.
Oh, wow.
I know, as I'm lying there. And then all of a sudden, it was like a switch flipped. And all of a sudden, it was like this, it felt like this swirling energy inside me that was like, I was like, I don't want to be bitten by a snake. I'm not going to be bitten. Can I swear on this show?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to be bitten by a fucking snake. I was just like, fuck that. and, I, and I got up and I was just like, I'm fucking out of here. And I stormed off. And I literally was like a 1 year old having a temper tantrum. I was like pounding my feet.
That sounds sort of fun. I wonder if there was like a viper hidden away somewhere that was tracking you and like, doggone it, I wanted to bite her.
I was right
And
there.
now she stomped away. How frustrating to be that viper.
Who the heck knows? They all stayed up there by the rocks and nobody else got bitten by a viper. So I'm pretty sure that one was in my head, but it was. So I'm stomping off and I'm like, I'm going to find Force. Force being the woman who had gone ahead. And then all of a sudden, again, it was like this swirling energy inside me that was just like, fuck, I'm getting out of here. And I start stomping. I'm like, fucking getting out of here. Fuck this experience. And fuck that. I was like cursing like a freaking banshee. And I was looking for Force, who apparently I stomped right by because she was just like, oh yeah, I just watched you. You were like a whirlwind just cursing and stomping by. And then all of a sudden, I started to run. And I was just like, I'm like going. And so I'm running down this mountain. And she had mentioned a little at the top that there's like a rhythm to San Pedro. And she's like, because she was referring to it when I was sobbing to somebody else. I just overheard this. And she was like, it's going to start to pick up a pace. And it's sort of like I'm not even doing it properly, but like it's a quick pace, like that. And she was doing that. And all of a sudden, as I was running, it's a path, it's a mountain, it's a hiking path, and we're going downhill, and there are all these rocks. And I started to go, and I was going fast. And it was interesting because I was like, it felt like that rhythm. I was like, pop, 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 pop. Like I could just pop and skip over those rocks. And every once in a while, I'd go into my conscious mind and I'd be like, oh, I could fall. That would suck, and then I would have to slow down because it was like that was getting in the way of this natural rhythm. So it was interesting to see that, isn't that how life is? When our thoughts get in the way, like, oh, this might be dangerous. And then all of a sudden we lose. And I could see that was happening. And so I'd be like, again, continuing on my little tangent, fuck that, and I just, and then I would like, poo, poo, poo. And I was running. I mean, running. And then all of a sudden I get tired. And then I would just like curl up in a ball. And I would just be like, oh, okay. And then it would be like this swirling energy would go again. And I was going down, and all of a sudden I was passing where I had been camping. I feel a little badly because it actually was a very sweet spot. It was where all the mother horses and the baby horses were. And my last day of camping, I came up from where I was camping, and all of the horses were up in like my favorite spot, including 3 of the babies. It was like, they all came to say goodbye. I was just like literally in tears that day. I was like, this is so beautiful. But now in my little San Pedro frenzy, I was just like, fuck that mountain. I don't need that mountain. I got this. There's a horse that was standing in the path. And I was like, get out of the way, and the horse just looked at me like, another one of these. And he just sort of like slowly moved out of my way. But now I kind of also knew where I was because I had now walked this twice. So I'm like going down, and there was this pink house, and I was like, I'm going to be the first one to get to the house. Like I was in a race. Nobody else was racing, but I was going to win this race. And I'm tearing down, I'm running, and I finally get to that pink house, and I slam my hand. I'm like, I won. And I slam my water bottle down, kind of like a football player would. A football. I was like, yeah, score. I mean, it was that energy.
The masculine energy.
It was the masculine energy. I was competitive. I had to win. I was racing. I was very physical. I was in this rhythm. I was like going. It was like blinders on. Nothing was going to stop me. It was all of, look, all those things in the masculine are phenomenal. We can use those things. They're great when combined with the feminine, right? If you're only in that, it could be a bit much, as it was this day. If you're only in the feminine, that could be a bit much. So that's where that, circling back to the beginning of, well, what do you feel if you're going to explore something different? I say embrace it, because both are really, really useful. And I experienced that. And it's interesting because I love sports, but I'm not like, it's never about the competition for me. I'm always competing against myself. But that day I had to win against other people. And it was interesting how I felt like that was helpful in a weird way. It was almost like it was making me better. And I thought that's probably something I should look at. Like, don't shy away from it. I was realizing maybe I'm shying away from competition to provide a buffer, a safety. It's okay if you don't win. You're just doing this for yourself, right? And so again, it's not like I'm motivated by winning. I don't have to win, but I am motivated by being better.
Well, and I have to say, hearing this, that it could open the door, if you embrace that, to a different sort of self-empowerment.
Yes.
And that's something that is valuable, particularly for those of us whose lives have, and that's pretty much everyone, have had struggles in them. And so I don't want to discount what you're saying. And I'm, again, glad that you say that. Competitiveness can get a bad rap.
Right.
I do think, though, personally, and hearing you talk about it this way, that if approached with the appropriate mindset and put in the larger context of the entire spectrum of humanity that the feminine and the masculine represents, it can actually be a source of elevation or of bringing something that's valuable from our core out into the world to accomplish things.
I love the way you articulated that. That was brilliant. I'm going to go back and write that down myself, because no,
it wasn't me that said that. I was possessed by
you
the
just
psycho
channeled
nurse.
it. That is exactly it. And that was genuinely how I felt. And then I'll wrap up the story, I promise. But at that moment, I was like, okay, I need to stop. And I sat down. My inner essence and my Sphinx code, and I only bring this up because I felt like I lived every one of my pieces of the Sphinx code. My inner essence is a hangman, and the downside to a hangman can be falling into victim. Very opposite energy to force, right? This like, and so I sat down, and all of a sudden I just like, kind of was like, all right, I guess I'll just wait here for everyone. And I put my head down. I was just like visualize. I imagine it felt to me like all of a sudden this like black smoke came out of my head. It was so weird. I was like, what was that? It was just like, whew. And then
wow,
all of a sudden that surge came up. Like, okay, I'm done with that. Get up. You got to get right down the rest of the mountain. Like, come on. And so I got up, and there was another little piece left till we got to the parking lot. And I like, again, charged down, pop down all those rocks. And this time I was like not getting in my head. I was just flying, got down, same thing. Bam, I got it. I even like, all right, here's my vulnerable, grab my crotch, kind of like that football player, like, yeah. And then I sort of like charged around, and then I had some time to wait, and so I sat there, and I had another piece of my Sphinx code is this catalyst energy. And so I was sort of sitting there like, all right, now I gotta fucking catalyze these people off the mountain. As if I could do that. But I was like imagining like this is what I'm gonna do. And weirdly, I slipped just for a second back into little hangman, and my head dropped down, and I was like, I'm gonna do a headstand. the crazy things you decide on San Pedro. So I went to try to do a headstand, and then I was like, it's really hard to do a headstand when you're on San Pedro in hiking boots on dirt in a parking lot. But I started to laugh because, again, it sort of brought back that reflection of like, oh, it's hard to be a victim. It's as hard to be a victim as it
Oh,
is to be empowered. And that,
whoa.
yes. And that was
That's
a moment.
that's a moment. It's interesting because being a victim, I associate it at least with it being easier in a way because you don't have to act. You get to be passive.
Mm-hmm.
But you're pointing out as I'm hearing it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Sonia, that passivity, well, first of all, is itself active, but it also causes these negative consequences that make our lives toxic, which of course you sort of know once you realize you're playing the victim in a situation, but your life is harder because of it. How did all of this transform you? I assume then at some point shortly after this, the San Pedro went on its way and you had to integrate, absorb, and move on with your life. How did your life change afterwards? How did your thinking, how have you become someone different?
Well, I will say one last piece to this experience because it was my last really like insane moment,
Yeah.
as I lovingly say. So finally, everybody came down, and then they brought out some just like snack food. They were when somebody had chocolate, and I was like, "Give me that chocolate!" I'm eating it like it was like I was like a savage. I was like, and then I kind of went off on my own. I'm sort of dancing as they're playing music from the car and sort of dancing on my own. And then all of a sudden, I stop and I start roaring like, ah! And my daughter again
Wow.
is on the other side of the street. But and then I hear the wife say, yeah, there might be a few more of those. And I'm thinking to myself, no, there's not. Like, that's, I don't know where that came from, but that's done. Sure enough, two more loud roars. Ah! And after the third one, we left, and then we went back, and that was that. But kind of. But the reason I bring that part up is because how do I bring it back into real life, right? How do you integrate that crazy experience? I think I have used that roaring as a bit of an anchor for me because when I find myself, I'll remind myself, as you know beautifully articulated, like it takes as much energy to fall into victim, and the consequences and getting yourself out of that hole takes a lot of energy, and all of the emotional psychic energy that goes along with not doing and feeling like, ugh, I'm not like doing what I know I'm meant to do, or just ugh. It's, and I still fall into it sometimes. I am not perfect. I'm
Yeah.
so aware of it. And at that moment I'll be like, yeah, you know, and I will activate that physicality, and I'll be like, what am I going to do now? And so I will tap, and that's where I feel like that masculine energy has been a godsend. You know, it's been just such a gift in terms of flipping some of those moments that are very counterproductive and not the highest expression of who I am or can be, and into something that's better. And so I definitely, and I am also aware of when I'm like, oh, I'm not competing. I'm just like, doing it. I'm like, no, you can push that a little. You can be better than that.
Mm.
And more of less again against beating somebody else, and more about like, don't you like fall into this, I'm just doing it. I'm just trying to be as good as I can. Like, get out there and go full out. That's really what it means to me. Um, and and that's really, really, I mean, I think that experience was so powerful in terms of really highlighting that, showing me that, and really helping me see the difference in the different patterns that potentially could show up, in my life specifically, and really honoring um, a really important and powerful part of my soul blueprint, and just my life.
Sonia, thinking about everything that you've just shared from a pure story perspective, I have to say that the arc was absolutely wonderful. As I'm sitting here listening to you share that conclusion, I'm feeling inspired, and inspired in a way that I actually have never been on this show before. Now, I'm not saying that I haven't been inspired on this show before. I have. But this was something totally different. And I would love to hear from any fans of this show who get to this point in this episode and understand how they hear this, how they feel it, and if it leaves them feeling different. But before we close the show out, I've got to ask one question. I know some people are thinking this, even if they won't say it out loud to our faces, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would you say to those who might be saying, what kind of mother goes with her daughter on a psychedelic trip?
Oh my gosh.
You
I
know,
was
like, you
surprised
know,
that
I
didn't
gotta
come up
ask that.
earlier.
Come on. I've been waiting, but I was not going to let that go because I do think it's important. And if we were to let that go, I think that a lot of the audience would have a big issue that you have a good answer to unresolved.
No, I think it's an extremely fair question. And definitely something I asked myself a number of times,
Mm,
what kind of mother would do this? Of course, when you're in those circles, they're like, what an amazing mother you are that you would actually do
mm,
this. So that was pretty helpful to sort of hear at a time when I
mm-hmm,
was definitely questioning my judgment. And I guess I would offer there are two sides of that story. It was life changing for my daughter, my husband, who was vehemently against it. Like, this was a real, this was a tricky one to sort of
mm,
cross that barrier, but she really wanted to go. And understand, my daughter I wouldn't necessarily say I would go with anybody, but
mm-hmm,
my daughter has done a ton of spiritual work. Even her Sphinx code, ironically, has sort of a blueprint of like shaman energy. Like, she's a very deep, profound kid. So I also felt like she could handle it. And she had already done a lot of other different, more traditional forms of, I don't know, therapy, self help, if you will. And so she
mm-hmm,
wanted something else. She felt like there was something else
mm,
that could be more helpful for her. So it was both sort of answering her call, like she was very much wanting it, and knowing who she was as a person definitely played into it. Yeah, I kind of want my son to do it, but maybe not right away.
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
I think you have to take into account who you're dealing with.
mm-hmm,
Um, and after the fact, my husband would be the first person to say, I was wrong. And that was the best thing that both of you guys did. And I'm so glad you did. And she's since gone back and done some work with the shaman. She actually went to Mexico with them, and she's does the Sphinx code now. And she also did some work with his wife. So it has definitely been extraordinarily helpful on her journey. She struggled a lot, like many teenagers during COVID years. And
mm-hmm,
this really opened up a side of her and a depth of her and acknowledged who she was. I think it's such a core level that made her
mm-hmm,
feel okay with herself as opposed
mm-hmm.
to at odds with herself. So I totally understand and I respect how people could say, like, who are you to do that? At the same time, I can say that it was under the circumstances, I felt like it was a potential for a great thing. And I could also say, hey, I'm just the greatest mom because I did allow her to do it.
Yeah. You know, thinking about that answer as well as everything else that you have shared during this episode, the whole underlying thesis of the Webdelics podcast is, if anything, reframing, rethinking about how we define medicine, what we think
Mhm.
psychedelics are and are possible, what healing is, what pain is, what identity is, even what human consciousness is. And yet again, you have reframed, for me at least, what masculine energy stands for, what it can bring, as well as how it can be channeled to do things that we might not otherwise give ourselves permission to do. And that's a beautiful thing, because to me, if being human is anything, it's about being fully who and what we are. Sonia, if there is one last takeaway that you'd like to share, what would it be?
Hmm. I just want to reiterate your point about Webdelics really being about reframing, and reframing being such an important part, because I teach that in coaching too, because I think it's the lens through which we see things will shift dramatically the results of which we get it. And so I do this perspective thing where I have people walk through different perspectives, and that's really the pure thing, is to be able to see it from different places, different points of view, not different options, but different points of view. And I think plant medicine opened up a point of view that perhaps I wasn't able to access
Mm-hmm.
in that exercise. And I think that is one of the amazing things that plant medicine can do. And why I went from being, I wouldn't say that I was against it. I was never against it. I just was never like, I don't know. I was kind of neutral on it, but now I can definitely say that I feel like I'm a fan of it if you feel called to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think if there's one takeaway, it's, through the lens of reframing, where can you step up and tap your courage to really honor who you are? Because I so believe that everyone has a magical thing, part of them, something that they're meant to share. And the more we're able to access that, the more we're able to tap that and be in alignment with that, the better ripple effect and the better this world will be.
You end the episode on a crescendo. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Scott.
How can people find out more about you? Where can they go to follow you? And tell us about any projects that you have outstanding or coming up.
Yeah, so you can go to my website, soniasatra.com, Sonia, Satra, Satra.com. I'm also on all this basic social medias, Instagram, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and I would love, love, love to see you there. I also just put out a book. You can check that out. What if it were easy? Not saying it is, but talk about reframe. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
question, is about a perspective shift. What if it were easy, using movement and mindset to create success in life, love, and business? I am an adventurer. I used to do these a way back. It's like a half day adventure where we'll do a workshop on a theme. And this theme is going to be, what's the wall in the way? What's the wall that you're hitting up against, and how can you rise above that? And then we're going to go rock climb at Chelsea Piers. So that's going to be a half day event on March 9th. So check out the website. That will be posted tomorrow. And social media will be coming up there as well. You can always sign on to my newsletter and you can find about other events. I'm speaking on March 13th in Bronxville, and I'll be running a course in April on money mindset.
Well, I may just have to go to that website and sign my name up.
Come climb the wall.
Thank you so much, Sonia. This has been a blast. And for those of you who have enjoyed this episode and found it as inspiring as I have, be sure to come back. We have a lot more coming up with regards to exploring a whole host of specific psychedelic and plant medicine substances in ways that are both human and curated to be scientifically accurate. If you enjoyed today's episode, I also would ask you to be sure to tell everyone that you know about it, as well as the Webdelics podcast itself. Then be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. And then please subscribe to this show on YouTube, as we just mentioned, or on your favorite audio platform. I'd really love it if you left us a nice, juicy 5-star review. And after you've done all of that, go to our website at webdelics.com. That's webdelics.com. Sign up to our newsletter for trusted, credible, and accurate information about psychedelics and plant medicine. Then above all else, be sure to come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.